right, tonight we're going to begin in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 43. We're down to almost to the end here. In fact, this will be the last thing, where he said, "Now you have heard it said, but I say unto you." And so he's going to teach them now the kind of people that they ought to be. Now, without going back through anymore, because there's no need of going back, each one of these things is unrelated to the other. He said, "Now you have heard it said of them of old there, that thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy." Now, as you look at the Jewish people at that stage, why would they say that? Why would they say, the rabbis teaching and so forth, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor, but hate thine enemies"? Well, could be, but probably a little more than that. Probably a little more than that. They would have there are a lot of things that happened to the Jewish people. Now, Moses didn't say hate thine enemy. You have to understand that. See, he said you love your neighbor, but he didn't say hate thine enemy. Now, as you go back, the Jewish nation was a physical nation, wasn't it? And it was a nation that God used to go to war. There would be times when he told them to go to war. In fact, what did he tell them about the Canaanitish nations when they came over, those Canaanites? What did he tell them to do? Go in and kill them. Tear down all of their temples, tear down everything, because their sin is full. They are totally immoral. They're worshiping other gods. They've just gone to the very bottom, you might say, of humanity. So I want you now to go in and kill them. In fact, for the Amalekites, what was it he told Saul to do? You remember there? Go down and kill how many people? Young, old, babies, cows, everything. Go down and kill them. Now, with these kind of commandments and this kind of activity, I suppose that this idea rose from that. I don't know. I suppose that it rose from that, because they were to keep themselves separate and apart from their enemies. They were to keep themselves pure as a physical nation. And so God had told them that you're to love your neighbor, but they added that part, "and thou shalt hate thine enemy." Now, as we look at this, we can see that God didn't teach that. Moses didn't teach that at that time. What he taught was, as we see in Deuteronomy 4 there, the first and greatest commandment is what? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God, how much? With all thy soul and with all thy might. And then he taught them that Jesus will later teach us the second commandment is like this. He said, "Thou shalt not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am Jehovah." Now, as he's talking here about thy neighbor, he's talking about the Jews. He's talking about your Jewish comrades. This is a law that controlled them. It's not talking about an attitude that you have toward your enemies. But even though it's not talking about an attitude you have toward your enemies, if I tell you now the people in this building should love one another. I want you to love one another. What does that mean you're supposed to do to people outside? I didn't say anything about them, did I? I didn't say anything. So I'd have to tell you, love them too, or hate them, or something. But if I just gave this, I told you. So this is what he gave now to the Jewish nation. But now look, here's a law that Moses gave. He said, "If thou meet thine enemy's ox," so now here you have your enemy's ox or his ass going astray, "thou shalt surely bring it back to him again. If thou seest the ass of him that hateth thee lying under his burden, thou shalt forbear to leave him, thou shalt surely release it with him." Now, what he's saying here is that if you're going along and you see your enemy's ox or ass, that is a donkey, that's going astray, you catch it and you take it back to him. If you were to find that donkey is burdened down with the burden that he has on his back, and maybe he's gotten away from you, he got his rope untied and he got away, and he's fallen down and he can't get up, And so here's this donkey that is burdened down. What would be the natural reaction if he's the enemy, if he's your enemy's donkey? Okay, just let him go, you see. Let him go. It deserves him right somehow. He said, now you're not to do that. Don't you do that. What I want you to do now is you let him go. You release him there. Now, let's talk here just a moment about the idea of love. What is love? When it talks about an enemy, this right here is a good illustration of it. Did Moses say, if you see your enemy's donkey loose, stray, or broken down, did he say, I want you to have real warm feelings about your enemy? No, he didn't say that. See, he didn't say that. But they are to love their enemy. Now, when I tell you when they did that, that's loving. That's loving your enemy. Now tell me why I'm saying that. Okay, the definition of love is an attitude that causes you to always act in the best interest of the one you love. So if you love your enemy and you see his donkey going astray, what will you do for the enemy? Now you don't even want to see your enemy. But if you're going to act in his best interest, you'll catch his donkey, take it back, tie it up to the tree out in his front yard, or something of this nature. And so Moses said, you do this. He said again, then the proverbist did, rejoice not when thine enemy falleth, and let not thy heart be glad when he is overthrown. Now, this is kind of a unique situation. David, in writing some of the Psalms, talked about, let my enemy be overthrown, and the enemies of God should be overthrown. You have to balance these two things. When there is an obviously, there's a right and there is a wrong. Now let's take the situation we're in now, let's say with Iraq. And as you look at the way Saddam has treated those people, and you see that, what's the best thing for those people? Is it to be relieved or leave them in there? In other words, could Bush go to war under an act of love, is what I'm saying? Well, he could if he says this is what is the best for them. Now, I don't know any motives that are anything in there, and I'm working it down to you and me, is what I'm working in here too. Now, as we look at this, we look at Saddam, and how do you feel about him? How many of you feel nice, warm, fuzzy things about him and would like to meet him and have him to come over and live with you or something of this nature, see? No, he's a horrible individual. Okay, now, when he's overthrown, what you going to do? See? When he's overthrown, what you going to do? Blow him to pieces? All that? Well, does he deserve it? Yeah, he deserves it. He deserves it okay. Let me ask you, are you going to cry and say, poor Saddam? Are you going to say, I wish he wasn't overthrown? I wish he'd have won the battle? Well, are you going to be glad that he's overthrown? Do you see what I'm getting at here? You'll say, yeah, I'll be glad when it's all over. I'll be glad when the victory is out. But here it says, rejoice not when thine enemy falleth. Now, what does that mean? See, what does that mean? Well, I think all of us can put it in our own personal life, and we can see really what it means. There's a big difference in right and wrong. When right and wrong comes into conflict, which one does a righteous man want to see victorious? Righteousness. And you want to see wickedness fall. But what this says is, when your enemy falleth, and this is talking about, suppose that Lee does something to me, and boy, he's my terrible enemy, and he has really hurt me. What will be my tendency when I hear tomorrow he got in an automobile accident and maybe is a paraplegic? Oh, good. That serves him right. You say, I'm happy. Yes. Don't you be that way. See, that's what he's talking about. Don't you be that way. Be happy when you see such a situation like this. When somebody does something wrong and they are your enemy, should they be brought to justice? Yeah. Are you happy if they are caught? If a child molester is caught, are you happy? Yeah. Yeah, you're happy. That's in there. This is where the Bible teaches both of these. That, yeah, you can be happy there, but don't rejoice when your enemy falls. And this is talking about your personal enemy. Somebody does something wrong to you, and then they have a problem. Oh boy, ha ha ha, and do this there. So that really is not what then the Bible teaches, that you should hate your enemy. So what Jesus says now is here, but I say unto you. Now he's going to give his teaching in this whole thing, and here his teaching is then. He goes ahead and says, but I say unto you, love your enemies, and pray for them that persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. So now, when you have an enemy, you're to love him. Now, what does that mean? Let me say this. There are two words in the Greek language for love, which the Bible's written. One of them is a love, and it's the phileo. It's the word we get Philadelphia from. Delphos is brother, and philos is love. So Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love. Now, philos is phileo is the word that means more of a warm feeling, the natural type of love, the love that you have for your kid. Your kid may do something wrong, and you feel like, I just want to wring his neck. But what are you going to? How do you feel about that child? So you have that phileo that is there. Now, this agape that we have here, the love that's talking here, is that it's an attitude. It's not a feeling. It's attitude that causes you to always act in the best interest of whatever you love. So I can have an enemy. I can have somebody who has cheated me out of a lot of money and told lies about me, and they've done all of these things, and I don't have any warm feelings about them. He didn't command me to have warm feelings, see. But here's what he said that I should do. I should love them. What does that mean? Act in their best interest, see. If they're in trouble, help them. And pray for them that persecute you. What are you going to pray for? You're going to pray that they'll persecute you more? What would you pray for if you're acting in their best interest? You're going to pray for a turn of heart, aren't you? You're going to pray that they will stop these things, that they will turn to the Lord, they'll straighten up their life. Okay? And so pray for them. And it said, that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. So it says, with God blesses evil people and good people alike. When he causes the rain fall or the sun to shine, he doesn't pick the fields out here of the good guy and let the bad guy over here have a drought, but he evens it out in here, and God blesses both. God blesses the good and the evil. Now, sometimes it might gall us, and as humans, I think it would. Somebody does me wrong, beat me out of a lot of money, tell lies about me, hurt me. What is my natural inclination? Let's just be truthful. What's my natural inclination? And then when you come around, you say, Lowell, you can't go punch that guy out. Okay, I won't go punch him out. Then you say, did you know that he's sick up here and in bed and doesn't have the money to pay for a doctor? Now that throws a new thing on me, doesn't it? Now what do I need to do to my enemy if I love my enemy? Well, it might be, Mike, you told me, let me write you out a check. You take it to him. I don't want to talk to him. But I'm going to act in his best interest. Do you see the point? That's what God does, and that's what we should do. So we'll be called sons of God. And if you love them that love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? I mean, everybody loves their own kind. If you went over here to eastern Washington and dug down in a rattlesnake den this winter, you'd find a whole lot of life down in there. But what would it all be? It'd all be rattlesnakes that's there. Well, rattlesnakes love each other. Publicans love each other. Publicans are tax collectors, and they were people that were noted as on the very bottom rung of humanity as far as making a living and morals were concerned. In both the Roman world and in the Jewish world, well, they were looked upon in that way. So that's the reason he uses this terminology. He said, and if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? And so if you say, well, I talk to and I salute and greet and I'm nice to people who love me, well, even publicans do that. The lowest people on the chain does such a thing as that in there. So he says, ye therefore shall be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Oh boy, now there's a big one. You're going to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. What does the word perfect mean? It means complete. See, that's what it means. It means complete. So I can tell you tonight that I am a perfect man. And there's a lot of grins out there, but you're wrong and I'm right. I am a perfect man. And you say, what do you mean by that? Well, I am a complete man. See, I have all the parts that it takes to be a man. I'm complete. Now, I can correct that. I had my tonsils taken out when I was a kid, so we might argue about it now, huh? Lowell, you're not a perfect physical specimen. See? And I say, why? And you say, well, you're missing your tonsils. Well, you're right, so I'm not perfect. The word perfect means complete. Now here, the complete is not talking about in the physical realm, it's talking about in the spiritual realm. What kind of a person should I be? I should be perfect. I should be complete. I should have everything that's right put in order, and it is in my life. And now, what's the standard? What are we going to use as a standard so that I can say, okay, I've reached it, now I'm perfect? What is the standard? Okay, even as your heavenly Father is perfect. See? Now, in Ephesians 4, he uses Christ as our standard. See? So, just like Christ, just like God, that's where I am to strive to be. Now, we're not going to make it. I don't know of anybody that's made it. But just because I can't make it, and I see myself falling and I stumble, does that mean I'm not supposed to strive? No, see, that's my goal. That's where I am to strive to reach. And should I get better every day of my life? I should get better every day of my life. The Apostle Paul one time made a statement over in the Philippian letter, which pretty well summarizes the whole thing right in here when he says this. He says in Philippians 3:13, brethren, I count not myself yet to have laid hold, but one thing I do. In other words, he said, brethren, I haven't attained to the highest. I've still got some growing to do. See, that's what Paul said. He said, but one thing I do, forgetting the things that are behind and stretching forward to the things that are before, I press on toward the goal of the prize of the high calling of God in Jesus Christ. So I keep pressing on, because I have a goal out there that I'm trying to reach. So this is what he's telling us to do. Set Jesus Christ, set God as your goal, and keep pressing on until we've reached that particular point. So that's the goal of all of us. We all have that. Now then, I put this up here in 2 Timothy. Compare 2 Timothy 4:14, where it talks about our enemies. The Apostle Paul had an enemy. He was in jail, and he's writing his last letter to Timothy, and it's 2 Timothy. And in chapter 4 and in verse 14, he tells us a sad situation. He says, Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil. Now that would be bad. How would you like to be in Paul's shoes? He's in a jail. He's in a dungeon. That's what a jail was, would be in a dungeon. He's getting ready to be beheaded. And then there's a guy that comes along by the name of Alexander. He was a coppersmith. And he said, Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. We don't know what that is. It's usually thought that in his trials in there that he probably came in and testified against him and lied and some things of this nature. Now, what Paul do? Here it is, Alexander the coppersmith did him much harm. Did Paul say, I hope you'll send him down to visit me on a daily basis? No. He says in there, he said, the Lord will render to him according to his works. Now, we've already learned about vengeance. What should we do? Do we take our own personal vengeance? No. The Lord will render to him. The Lord will take care of that. He's done me a lot of damage. He said, of whom do thou also beware? For he greatly withstood us with words. For at my first defense. See? So here's a guy that probably came in and testified falsely and lied about Paul, got him in trouble, getting ready to get his head cut off. And Paul, he's still not going to take personal vengeance, but he doesn't overlook it either, does he? What does he tell the brethren they should do with Alexander? Beware of him. Watch out. See? Watch out. Now, is that not loving Alexander the coppersmith? When Paul says that, is that not loving him? No. No. Paul is, you're to act in the best interest of him. And when Paul warns the other brethren to watch out for him, that can even be in his best interest, isn't it? Right? To keep him from getting in any more trouble and doing any more harm than what he's done here. So, all of these things is not just a namby-pamsy situation as people look at it and say, love is just a big, soft blob, that blah, blah, and people run over you and so forth. No, there's real meaning in these words here that he has. Okay, now, I want you to notice what we've had here. We're getting ready to change tones right here. Now, as we started out, back in the Beatitudes, we had the character of a man. Jesus said, now these are the character that I want you to have. Here's what you need to have. This is the kind of quality of a person you ought to be. Theirs is going to be the kingdom of heaven. Then, we've just now come to a conclusion of another section, and these, he dealt with the works of man. He said, control your anger, don't raka, and so forth. Don't insult people, be peaceful, don't lust, pay prices that you owe. Don't go out and get divorces haphazardly, only reason except for fornication. Keep your oaths, do good to everybody, don't take vengeance, love everyone. All right, now these are the works that an individual then is supposed to have. Now we turn to chapter 6. And as we turn to chapter 6, now then we have the motives behind the works. Here's the motives now. So now, as you're doing these things, you need to do them with a certain motive. When you do your works, whether it's giving alms to the poor, that's what alms means, is a gift to the poor. When you're praying, when you're fasting, don't be hypocritical about it. Don't do it as the hypocrites do it. So now he's going to compare them and tell them, now your motives are to be different than the motives of these other people. Just like he's told them, your righteousness is to exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees. Now look in chapter 6, verse 1. Take heed that you do not your righteousness before men. Now here's the righteousness that I want you to have. See? This is the kind of person that you should be here. Now, make sure that you don't do all of these good works before men, to be seen of them. Now, let's make a distinction. Is it wrong for somebody to see you do a good work? Is it wrong for you to do a good work knowing that somebody will see you? No. What makes it wrong? If I go out tomorrow and I do a good work, what makes it wrong? What nullifies it? Just nips the whole thing in the bud. if that's the reason I'm doing it, to be seen of men. If my purpose is so people will see me and brag on me, then it's going to nullify it. So that's what he's getting ready to say here. He said, else you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. And we'll see why in just a minute. When you do these things in order to be seen of men. All right, when therefore thou doest alms, or when you give something to somebody, if somebody needs some money, and you give them some money here, he says, when thou doest alms, sound not a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Now, nobody, hypocrites or nobody else, went out and had a trumpet and blew a trumpet before they gave some things to men. What are trumpets? What does he mean? Today we talk about it. You know, it's trumpet of the world. Or that guy will blow his trumpet. What? It's calling people's attention to yourself. See, calling attention to yourself. I say sometime, I learned this, I don't know where I learned it, but he who bloweth not his own trumpet, the same shall not be blowing. And so, if a person said, well, I'm going to blow my trumpet, well, that's what he's saying right here that is against it. So here's somebody, and it's wrong. I mean, if they need some money, I reach them a billfold, I give them some money. Somebody sees me, that's just perfectly fine. But I am going to give this person some money, and I want to make sure now that everybody sees me. I get over here, and Lee, you still need that $20? Here it is, Lee. Here's $20. Make sure that, yeah, see that you get it here. Now, if you trumpet it abroad, call people's attention to it, he says, now you're just like the hypocrites. Well, we need to define that word, hypocrite. Now, we say, well, that's a Bible word. No, not really. Not really. Now, we use it today as a biblical word in that way. Do you know what hypocrite means? It means movie star. That's what it means. Movie star. You have the big things, you know, Grammys and all that, Oscars and all of that, for the hypocrites. That's what it's for. They were the stage actors. That's what it means, a stage actor. So they didn't have movies then, so you can't say a movie star, but a stage star. That's what it was. Now, what is it? Why would he call that? Why would he use that word, a stage star? Don't do it like the stage stars do. When a person is going to be in a movie and they take a part, it's a part that they are not, isn't it? In other words, here's an old boy's going to be a cowboy. He maybe has to go and learn how to sit on a horse. He might not know how to ride a horse. He might not know anything, but he's going to play the part. He's going to play a part of which he is really not. And that's what a hypocrite is doing something that you're really not. Now, I want to show you how generous and liberal I am. I want to show you what a good guy I am. Lee needs $20. So, Lee, you still need it? So, I want to make sure that everybody sees me so you'll know how great I am. Am I putting on? Am I putting on an act? Yeah. I'm putting on an act. The only reason I'm giving him that 20 is not because I'm really a good guy, but it's because I want you to see me do that. So he said, don't be as hypocrites. He said, verily I say unto you, they have received their reward. Now this is interesting because this is a phrase that they found in documents. You know, when they go out and they dig up documents and archaeological sites and so forth, and they dig up thousands of different things and all different kind of papers and mortgage papers and everything else. And so they pick up, they dig out a paper, and here's one guy, and he sold another guy something. And so here is the receipt that Joe bought so-and-so off of here. And then we stamp it, and what does our stamp say? Paid in full. We stamp that. That's the words, those are the Greek words right there that they have, that they put on there. They have your reward. This is it. This is what you get. So what God is saying is this, in our terminology. If I give $20 to Lee in order to be seen of men, that's my motive, and you see me, then I'm paid in full. That's it. I'm not getting anything from God. Now, if that's not my motive, and I'm doing it because I want to serve God, God will bless me for that. But if I'm doing it to get glory from men, I have been paid in full. You can put the stamp on it. See? That's it. He said, but when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father who seeth in secret may recompense thee. Now, he's not saying everything that you do that's good, you have to do in secret. You remember what he said back in the 5th chapter about a light on a hill? And what did he say about let your good works? What was that statement? Let's go back and read it back here. What was it down in verse 16, chapter 5, verse 16? Even so let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So there's nothing wrong with people seeing your good works. And when they see your good works, they know you're a good person. And they know you're a good person because you're a child of God. And God gets the credit. God gets the credit. But if they see me do this good work that I'm giving to Lee over here, and they see why I'm doing that, you see, it's for my own glory. Well, who's going to get the credit? I'm going to get the credit. People will go away and say, did you see what a wonderful man Lowell was? Nobody else gave Lee $20, but Lowell just pulled it right out and gave it to him. He's a wonderful man. Okay, I got my glory. I'm paid in full, you see. And so he said, don't do that. As you do your good works, don't do them to be seen of men. Just go about your business. Do them without any fanfare. Do them without anything. Don't even let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. It's a figure to show us. And once you hear that, you never forget it, do you? It's one of those statements you never forget. What does that mean? It means that I'm going to give that to Lee. I don't even tell Kyle down here what I'm doing. I'm not going to tell anybody. Just go ahead and do my good works. Now then he turns to pray on the very next. Now when you pray, you shall not be as the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have received their reward. So there again is it. So now, getting ready to pray. Okay, they love to stand in the streets. They generally get a street corner where you can see them in any direction you're coming. And then they go to synagogues, and then they would stand and pray, and the Jewish stance of praying was kind of like this. They would stand and pray, and people would see them praying. And so they're praying in order to be seen of men. So you say, what righteous people they are. It reminds me, as I told you about those Jewish rabbis that were on the plane when we went to Israel, about a dozen of them, I suppose. And when their prayer time came, they'd jump up, they'd run back, and all of them would stand there in a circle right back by the restroom, and they'd all stand there and they'd all read in a book. And they'd just be there reading in a book, and and they'd be looking around, doing like this. And everybody knew they were praying. They prayed for about 20 minutes, and this is what Jesus is talking about. You see, that is in there. That's an extreme situation of it. Now, is it wrong for people to see you pray? No. You remember in Acts 28. Remember what Paul did out on the shipwreck after they'd been shipwrecked all those many days, and he says, "Now an angel appeared to me and said, we're not going to die, and so let's take food and let's eat." And it said, and he gave thanks to God. He didn't go off and hide somewhere. He gave thanks to God, but he didn't give thanks to God just to be seen of men. See? So those are the differences we're talking about. 6. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thine inner chamber, and have shut thy door. Pray to the Father who is in secret, and the Father who is in secret shall recompense thee. And in praying, use not vain repetitions as the Gentiles do, for they think they shall be heard for their much speaking. So now, don't pray to be seen of men, and then don't have long prayers and repetitious prayers saying the same thing over and over again in here. It says here, don't do that. They think they'll be heard because of their much speaking. Now, this again remind me that everybody takes their prayer book and they all go back and they pray the same prayers. And they have the same thing, and they're just standing there and they're looking around and be praying, just and just like you would reading a book. They pretty well have it memorized and go through life and praying like that. What do the Muslims do? How many times a day they pray? 5 times a day. That's one of the major things in their religion is that you must say Allah is the only God. That's number one. And the other thing, the greatest thing in the Muslim religion is saying your prayers 5 times a day. And so they have the certain hours, and so at certain set hours, all the Muslims in the world, all the way around the world, all fall on their knees, face over toward Mecca, and they pray. And they have the same prayer. And it's taught them. And so it's taught them, they memorize it, they say the same prayer 5 times a day. And so they claim they do that, then that is another ladder, one of the big things that will help them able to go to heaven then when they die. So this is what this is talking about here. What about the Catholic Church with rosaries? What is that doing? Every time you put a bead around, same thing. Have you ever seen on TV? I saw it just this last week. People praying somewhere in one of the eastern countries over there, and they went to this temple, and I think it was a Buddhist temple, and as they go out, well, here's a guy, and he goes out, and there's a whole lot of prayer wheels that's there. You know what a prayer wheel is? It's a wheel that you put on a clothesline up here. Just put it on a rope, or put it on anything, and it's like a Rolodex card goes around. And so they have all these prayers written out in little pieces of paper and stuck on this prayer wheel. So on each prayer wheel, there could be 500 prayers on this. Well, as you go by, you walk by and you spin it, and every time it goes around once, that's sending 500 prayers up to God. If it goes around twice, it's sending 1,000. And so you hit it pretty hard, and you get a whole lot of prayers. Now, the way that you get the thing going, the way they had it there is, you'd walk along and brrr, it's just like hitting, you should walk along hitting certain things and just hitting one after the other. And here's a guy that's going, you look back and the prayer wheels are still spinning. And so he hit 15 or 20 prayer wheels. They went around 15 or 20 times. 300 to 500 of them on each one. Think how many prayers you see that went up. We human beings are funny people. And so this is what the Lord is saying in here. He said, for your Father knoweth what things you have need of before you ask Him. So it's not that. It's not that you have to educate God. God knows what you need. God wants you to ask with respect for what you need. Now this is kind of like a loving father and a son. Does a father know what the son needs? Why, of course he does. He's got the thing down. The little boy comes in and says, Dad, I want a pair of roller skates. I want this. Well, no, you can't have them until you're 3 years old. Or, I want a BB gun. Oh, you can't have that until you're over here. I want this. And the dad has it down of where he knows what that kid is. Well, would any dad want a child where as soon as the child learns how to speak, Dad calls him in and said, now, son, I don't want you to ask me for anything because I know what you want, and I'll give it to you when the time is right. So don't ever ask me for anything. What kind of relationship would that have, see? And sure, the kid's going to come in. Dad, would you do this? Would you do that? Would you help me here? Would you do this? Would you do that? You see. But he says, don't pray thinking that you have to tell God what you need. Now, he says, now, after this matter, pray ye. Now then, he's going to give them an illustration of how they are now to pray. So here's what's generally called the Lord's Prayer. Now, this again is where people memorize this, and they say, okay, this is the prayer we memorize, and bing, 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 and say it without really much thought to it. But he said, now, after this matter, therefore, pray ye. Now, he's teaching them how to pray, isn't he? In other words, this is not the Lord's Prayer. This is not the Lord praying. This is the Lord teaching them how to pray. See? It's going to be a general thing. He's going to teach you. Okay, so if you want to pray, here's how you do it. So he says, you say, first of all, Our Father who art in heaven. So now then, you properly address God. You go to him and you address him in the proper way. Now he's going to talk about addressing God, and part of the prayer here is going to be in behalf of God, see, toward God. But our Father who art in heaven. Then he says, hallowed be thy name. Now that word hallowed means holy or sanctified. That means set apart. It means that when you address God in a way that is set apart from anybody else. There is no one else that shares the position of God, the glory of God, the power of God. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Now, if you'll study Bible prayers, you'll find that they always start out with some terminology about God that exalts God. And you will see that when they're in trouble, like in Acts 1, and they were wanting to know which one of these men to appoint to the apostleship, they both had outward qualifications just exactly the same. But they were wondering which one was the best qualified, which one's heart was right. So they addressed him, O God, the heart knower, thou who knows the hearts of all men. So they addressed him that way. Now about 3 or 4 chapters later, why that persecution came upon them, and they're really in trouble. And they're being threatened now by the Jews. And so they go to God, and now then they start out with God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. In other words, the powerful God now. But when you go to God, always use the terminology of extolling him and setting him apart. Now, we hear that cute little saying, well, I talked to the man upstairs last night. Is that hallowing his name, you see? And so what he's saying is show that proper respect right there. Then he said, thy kingdom come. Why did he say thy kingdom come? Hadn't the kingdom already come? Not at this time it hasn't. When was the kingdom established? At the death of Christ. So right now, the kingdom hasn't been established. He's here to teach them and prepare them for this kingdom. He's going to be teaching them about the kingdom. So he said, now you pray, thy kingdom come. Now, let me ask you this. When you hear it today, you'll hear it on TV, and anytime people publicly say this, they start out, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Can you pray that today? No. Thy kingdom has come. See? It's already come. Now, we might learn it's a good lesson right here. When I address God, how should I address him? See? With a hallowed, sanctified name. Thy kingdom come, instead of saying, let thy kingdom come, would it be proper for me to pray, Lord, I pray you'll bless your kingdom. I pray that you'll help your kingdom to expand into the far corners of the earth. Okay? And pray somehow for the kingdom, because it's already come. And then he says, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Just like the angelic beings do God's will in heaven, I pray that that's what we may do down here. Now, when we're in this conflict that we're in right now, and you wonder what to pray for, Paul says about leaders of the lands and nations, Paul tells us in 1 Timothy 2, 1 and 2, he said, pray for all the rulers. Pray for them, that we might live in peace and tranquility. So pray for them. Well, you find God sets up nations. God removes nations. Is it time to remove Iraq because it's so bad? If it's not and we remove it, then doing something not in favor of God's eyes, what would be a good way to pray to God? Would it be okay to pray to God in behalf of Saddam? Is he part of the rulers of the land? He is, isn't he? See? Bless the rulers of the land, all of them, that they might make proper decisions in all this controversy that's going on. Help them that they might make the proper decisions. I pray that even Saddam might make the proper decisions. If it's God's will that his heart might be touched somehow and he disarms and does this or does that. But if not, he goes ahead and becomes more belligerent, and then his regime is shaken in there. But could I pray, Father, let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven? If it's time, remove him. Use the rulers to do what you would have them to do. See? And so you see, that would fall in then. Okay, now the second part of it is a petition for yourself. You're going to be praying now for yourself. Give us this day our daily bread. Now, boy, that's so easy to say, but what do we generally say? Give us this day our bread for the next 20 years. Isn't that what we want? I mean, how many of you want a retirement guaranteed? Isn't that a comfortable thing to have out there? Give us this day our, what kind of bread? Daily bread. So we need to learn to be happy and content with what we have. That's what he's going to teach us in next week, is about these physical things. And right here he's saying, learn to pray that you will be taken care of today. Then forgive us our debts. Now this is not your financial debts. This is sin. Forgive us what we owe you. See? Forgive us what we owe. What is the wages of sin? It's death. See? That really is what you owe. All right, now forgive us. Forgive us what we owe. Forgive us of our sins in there. And then he puts a stipulation on it. And how will the Lord forgive us? And how should we ask him to forgive us? As we forgive others. See? Boy, that's a big thing, isn't it? As we forgive others as they sin against us, that's the way we're asking God to forgive me. So if I will not forgive you, you sin against me, you do some terrible thing, you come to me and ask me to forgive you, and I won't do it. I'll hold a grudge. I'll forgive you, but I won't forget it. I'll, like this, every time I go to God and ask him to forgive me of my prayers, what can I expect? Well, it'll be exactly the same thing. Then he says, bring us not into temptation. Now, are the kids out there yet? They are. Okay, we've got to stop right here. Bring us not into temptation. This is a good one in here. The Lord, James 1 tells us that the Lord tempts no man to sin. But the Lord does bring us into situations of where we go through a lot of problems and we can sin. But now as we go through these persecutions, what does that do to you? It'll either break you down and cause you to sin, or it'll make a better person out of you. And that's what he's praying here, to keep us out of this other that's right here. Okay, they're out there. We have to stop.